and wine. I just want to say what a real pleasure it is to have this panel here today, a very distinguished panel here in our humble little shop. And thank all of you for coming. I'm just going to read a little bit because I get nervous and I forget everything. So Ewan Mcgaskill, who I think many of you will already know, a journalist with The Guardian for 20 years, probably doesn't need much of an introduction at all, is going to chair tonight's event. And then of course we have Stefania Maurizi, the author of this very important and powerful book, which has won 4 awards, I think the most recent this year, and also Stella Assange, who is a lawyer and a human rights activist. So real pleasure to have you all here tonight, and thank you for coming to Bookmarks. Now I'm going to...
I'm going to chair the meeting, so let people back in. I'd like to keep it as informal as possible, and I think maybe the most interesting format would be if we have maybe Stella will speak for 10 minutes and Stefania will speak for 10 minutes. I'll give a short introduction, but then we have maybe about 30 minutes of Q&A, maybe more, depending if we sort of stick to her. Because to me, I find the questions quite more interesting than anything I've got to say. In that introduction, you said that most of you would know who I am. I very much doubt it. I've been in The Guardian for 30 years, and I retired in January finally. I was best known, at least in The Guardian, for the coverage of Edward Snowden. I went with Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras to Hong Kong and interviewed Snowden and did the stories after that. But before that, I was involved with Julian and WikiLeaks. I was Guardian's Washington bureau chief in 2010 when the first of the Cablegate stories came. And so I wrote a few of the stories, but I was mainly there for the reaction, the angry reaction from Hillary Clinton at the State Department, from people like Joe Biden, who was then a senator and who called Julian a terrorist.
High-tech terrorist.
You're exactly right, high-tech terrorist. And so I was involved in that. You know, from the outset, I thought this whole idea of prosecution was ridiculous. This was an act of journalism that journalists and the rest of the world benefited from. And as each year has passed, it seemed more and more, this persecution has seemed more and more ridiculous. I'm not sure where this is going now. It seems astonishing to me that Julian's still in jail more than 5 years on. I was in Washington in December and I was talking to American reporters there, and they said that the Biden administration was, as we've since heard, maybe considering some sort of deal that would see him free. But the American reporters added a caveat. They said there was no real pressure from the media in the US, and there's no pressure, substantial pressure from US politicians. So the Biden administration, in an election year, didn't feel a need to address this. So if there'd been pressure on them from the US media or from US politicians, maybe that would have changed. So I'm not sure. The main pressure in America seems to be coming from the Australian government, and if Biden was going to react to anything, I think that would be the only thing he would really react to. As for the UK, I'm embarrassed that the UK didn't finish this a long time ago. When Gary McKinnon was involved in something 20 years ago, it was a Conservative Home Secretary, Theresa May, that said he's not been extradited to the US. And I don't understand why the same thing hasn't happened here. If there's a Labour government, can we expect some sort of hope that Keir Starmer is going to...
It was Cameron's DPP, wasn't it?
He was, yeah. He was, yeah. So I don't see any hope there. So the only... I hope maybe Biden will change, maybe the Australian government, maybe through the legal actions that Stella can tell us about here. I've known both Stella and Stefania for 7 years. I met both of them for the first time in 2017. Stefania gave me this copy of the book when it first came out, and she put a quote in. She says, to Ewan, never doubt, it was a quote from Margaret Mead, the anthropologist. She says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This idea of sometimes you have small groups that sound like the voice in the wilderness or not making an impact. I'm sitting beside two people who have made a real difference. Stella, I met the first time in the Ecuadorian embassy with Julian. She's a human rights lawyer. She's married to Julian. But over the last 7 years, I think she's changed the mood. In 2017, there was a lot of hostility towards Julian. I think Stella, who's been at the forefront of the campaign, has changed the dial. There's more support, not enough support in the media or among politicians, but the mood has changed. There's more support for Julian now, and I think that's down to Stella. Stefania has also contributed to the change in mood. She's been one of the most persistent journalists in campaigning for Julian. She's been fighting to make his case better known. She's been involved in investigations. She's put down lots of freedom of information requests that have had repercussions. And quite often she's paid for this out of her own pocket. She's not been supported by some big media organisation. She's doing it herself, and she just keeps on going. One of the stories she produced as a result of a freedom of information request showed up the British Crown Prosecution Service engaged in some underhand, dubious practices in relationship to the discussions and negotiations with the Swedish government at the time. The implication of that was that the British government didn't want to resolve this. They just wanted to keep it going. It became a front page in the Splash in the Guardian, and that was down to Stefania. And a final point, on the same subject, just last month, John McDonnell and other British MPs have taken this up and asked parliamentary questions about the role of the Crown Prosecution Service in Julian's case, and they have to answer these questions. So I'll hand over now to Stella.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ewan, and thank you everyone for coming. Please get a copy of Stefania's book if you don't have it yet, because it is a forensic reconstruction of the persecution of Julian behind the scenes, and what we knew was happening but didn't have the evidence of it. And Stefania has painstakingly managed to get these documents out of the concerned governments, and is fighting to get more. But what we have is already a really telling exposure of the persecution. It's very nice to see lots of new faces as well.
Yeah.
And thank you to the Bookmarks bookshop for hosting this, because maybe I should do some like big picture where we're at sweep to begin with, because I know many of you know this inside out, but some of you may not, and it's important to put things into context. So Julian has been in Belmarsh High Security Prison for 5 years and 2 months now. He has been there continuously. I mean, there's been a few hours in 2019 and 2020 and January 2021 where he was taken to the courthouse. But apart from that, he has been in Belmarsh continuously now since January 2021. He hasn't been to the other hearings that there have been since January 2021. In the beginning, the first couple of years, because he wasn't allowed to attend, and the last 2 hearings because he hasn't been in, his health has not been in a condition which allowed him to come to the courthouse. So Julian is in Belmarsh, and he's in a small cell, a single cell, and he is there for over 20, 21, 22, sometimes 23 hours a day. He has limited contact with the outside world. He has no internet. He has visits a couple of times a week. He's able to call his lawyers. He's able to call a list of people that has been pre-approved by the prison, including myself and his brother, his father, and a few others. And he has books. He's surrounded by books, and he calls books his friends because that's where he escapes to with his mind when he's inside the cell. And the prison recently told him he had too many books, and he was in a bit of a back and forth with the prison. They told him he had to get rid of all the books except for 25. And then he said, "Well, show me the rule where it says you can only have 25 books." And then they couldn't find
this
it.
is Julian.
Yeah, they couldn't find that rule, and so they said, "Oh well, it's a fire hazard, and so it's a volume issue and a fire hazard." And so he, again in a very Julian way, said, "Well, then you can take my bed and I'll keep the books." So they took his bed, and he's been on a yoga mat, which sounds like a huge sacrifice, but the mattress wasn't that great anyway, is what he says. So
it's a great protest.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's surrounded by books, and he's reading constantly when he's well enough to read. That's his I think what keeps his sanity is the ability to escape through books. So during these 5 years in Belmarsh, there has been this court case. An extradition request was put in by the US, and in fact it was put in, the first request was put in December 2017. Secretly, it was a sealed communication to the British authorities, and Julian was arrested in April 2019. So throughout that time, from December 2017 to April 2019, the British authorities were fully aware that the US was after him. And in spite of this, British authorities were continuously making statements that he was just, he would be arrested in relation to the Bail Act, and that he was paranoid and this and that. And of course this was just a deception towards the public, because they knew full well, and the Judge Snow had already signed the arrest warrant in December 2017. So, Julian isn't just up against the United States, but there has been complicity at the highest levels, and I think Stefania's book has exposed the CPS from 2010, from the beginning, and their role in not just playing their official role, but also playing a political role. And this has been going on in the background, and we only know some of it. During the past 5 years, he's been fighting this extradition to the United States in a completely the case itself is you couldn't come up with a more outrageous and insane case. And if it had come from any other country, it would have been laughed out, and it wouldn't even have reached the courts. The Home Secretary would have thrown it out from the beginning. Julian is literally accused of receiving information from a source and possessing it and communicating it to the public. And he faces 175 years in relation to news gathering and publishing. But not only that, it was in relation to news gathering and publishing information that exposed the criminality of the country that is trying to extradite him. The war crimes, the assassination squads, the torture, what the United States was doing, and in relation to influencing and not just influencing, but interfering in the judicial processes of the Spanish judicial investigations, again in relation to U.S. personnel who had killed a Spanish journalist in Baghdad, for example, German investigation into the torture of their own citizen by U.S. Nationals who were working for the CIA, who renditioned and tortured him in a black site in a case in which he had been abducted by mistake, basically. So WikiLeaks revealed state criminality of the highest order, and there is no question that this information was in the public interest. So you have this. This is what makes the attack, the legal attack on Julian, so brazen. When you have political persecutions in other jurisdictions, it's usually for something else. But in Julian's, so it's a political persecution, it's a political prosecution, but there is some excuse that makes it look legitimate, like tax evasion or fraud or whatever. But here, they're outright accusing him of journalism. And so the purpose is to silence him, to bully the population, but also to create a new normal in which doing journalism is committing a crime if the authorities decide to go after you, basically. There's no difference between what Ewan did and what Julian did, except they just decided to go after Julian. And that has of course, a chilling effect. It's a intimidation on journalists to stop them from doing, brave journalism that confronts power. So this is basically what it's about, and over the past 5 years, you've seen a lot written about the case. You've seen all sorts of claims. They come up with the same old attacks that have been, showed to be completely complete bogus. But what's interesting about where we are at now is that as far as the British courts are concerned, there's just one live issue. And, well, it's two, but they're interrelated. And it goes to the essence of the case. It's about whether Julian will be able to rely on the First Amendment or not. And so everything that's been talked about for the past 5 years, very rarely has this issue been talked about, or written about. But it is the essence of the case, and it is, in fact, the only surviving legal ground that is before the court here at the High Court. It's the surviving issue. And just briefly, the Extradition Act bars extradition on very, very narrow grounds. But one of those grounds is under Section 81, and that is that you cannot extradite a person if they will be discriminated against at trial on the basis of their nationality. And the United States, throughout this process, has provided various affidavits and the prosecution, so you can't cross-examine what they say. The Department of Justice doesn't have to provide a prima facie case to the British courts. They just say, we want this person, this is what we say they said, they've done, and then they don't really have to prove any of it. And they provide sworn statements. And so the prosecutor, whose name is Kronberg, has issued a sworn statement in which he says, he expresses the US's intention to argue that Julian, because he's an Australian national and because he was in the UK and not on US soil, will not be able to rely on the First Amendment. And so this is the issue that the two High Court judges have said, actually, this is a relevant legal point that he should be able to argue in full at the High Court, and that's where we're at. We're waiting for a court date. I expect it will be before the summer recess sometime. The summer recess is third week of July. It could be after, but it could be, in July, and that's, there will be a hearing, and this issue of the Julian's ability to invoke the U.S. Constitution and its protections for freedom of speech is the issue.
Thanks, Stella.
Thank you, Stella. So thank you to Bookmarks Bookshop, thank you to Pluto Press for organizing this event, to Stella, Ewan, and most of all thanks to you for being here. So I'm here, some of them know me, know my work. I'm here to fight what the legendary film director Ken Loach calls a monstrous injustice. This is a monstrous injustice. He writes, this is a book that should make you very angry. It is the story of a journalist imprisoned and treated with unbearable cruelty for exposing war crimes, of the determination of the British and American politicians to destroy him, and of the quiet connivance of the media in this monstrous injustice. This is, in a nutshell, this is what this monstrous injustice is about. I have been working on this case for the last 15 years. Not only on this case, of course, but very intensely on this case. And you may ask why a journalist spends 15 years on a case. It's quite rare, of course. On the one hand, the documentation revealed by WikiLeaks, by Julian Assange WikiLeaks, especially the documentation for which he risks 175 years, the Afghan war logs, Iraq war logs, the cables, Guantanamo files are among the most important revelations in the history of journalism. We have a Pulitzer here. I think he can confirm that these documents are among the most important in the history of journalism, together with the Pentagon Papers and a few others. And I remember how exciting it was. Let me tell you how exciting as a journalist to get this documentation for the first time. We could see what the war propaganda machine was telling us about the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and what was happening, what the soldiers on the war theater were reporting. It was for me, it was a unique opportunity. I know there was a precedent in 1971 when basically Daniel Ellsberg revealed the documentation, the Pentagon Papers on the war in Vietnam. For me, it was the first time. And that was a unique opportunity. We could basically spot the lies. We could expose the lies of the war machine for the first time. It was absolutely exciting for a journalist. So, you have to realize the condition in which we work. We cannot even get the FOI documents. You ask for the documentation, but the governments do not provide the documents to you. So you have to go through years of litigations just to get a few documents. You have no chance to get these kind of documents. You have no chance. Let me tell you, Italy is a country which has a history of political violence. We had the Red Brigades, we had the strategy of tensions in the 70s, early 80s. We had these fascist terrorists, putting bombs in train stations and killing scores of people. Well, these people have basically tried to get the truth and justice about these massacres for the last 50 years, and they got nothing, absolutely nothing. After 50 years, they cannot get any truth about these massacres. Why? Because behind the scenes, the Italian intelligence services, not all of them, they were not all of them criminals, but there were some elements, really extreme guys on the right who basically provided support, provided help to get these terrorists attacking trains, banks, and killing scores of people. So these people, after 50 years, are still searching for truth, and they have no chance whatsoever. No chance whatsoever. Why? Because state secrecy get abused to cover up this state criminality at the highest level. So it's the state secrecy abuse, not to protect the security of citizens. No, we are told all the time that this secrecy is about national security. This secrecy is about protecting the security of citizens. But in most of the case, this state secrecy is completely abused, and these documents provide evidence of this abuse of secrecy to cover up state criminality at the highest level. State crimes like war crimes, torture, extrajudicial killings. We have hundreds of thousands of documents exposing this state criminality. So what I call the secret power, which is, is not a conspiracy theory. I avoid using deep state, because deep state in these days is everything. Everything is deep state. Secret power is the military-industrial complex. You can call military-industrial complex as President Eisenhower was calling it, but it is larger than the army, the arms industry, the secret service is larger. It includes part of the diplomatic people. It includes the big tech, because in these days you cannot fight wars without big tech. You know, in these days we have, for example, we have the Google workers, the Google technicians, which are basically protesting about the role of Google in Gaza, in killings massively people in Gaza, you know? So the secret power is bigger than the arms industry and the army and the secret services. And what Julian and WikiLeaks, because it was not only Julian, but Julian and WikiLeaks did, was to expose this military industrial complex as no media organization have done before. It's, you know, we know that it was not just about publishing secret documents. Many newspapers, many media organizations publish classified documentation. It's you know, a branch of journalism called the national security journalism. But what they did was to expose, to provide billions of people systematic access to classified documents exposing state criminality. And now this power want him dead. Actually, he's killing him slowly. The important thing, and that's why I have dedicated so many years to this work, and I put together, it took 3 years to write, to put a narrative to all this investigative work. The reason why there is no such large mobilization by the public opinion is that they didn't send killers to kill him. Actually, they planned. In 2017, the CIA, we know that the CIA devised plan to kill or kidnap him. But at the end of the day, they didn't send killers to kill him, as Politkovskaya. It happened with Politkovskaya. So the US and the UK didn't want to appear like in the case of Politkovskaya. So they used the judicial tool. And in addition to this, a demonization campaign, so that Julian has not enjoyed any massive public support for a decade. And that's crucial when you want to kill someone without using killers. You need to demonize him. You need that the people think he's a bad guy. He put people at risk. They say the US government is telling us, oh, we are not putting him in prison for journalism, but rather because he put lives at risk. But after 14 years, these documents were published. They cannot mention a single person killed or kidnapped due to this publication. And imagine if they had any evidence. It was, take the Obama administration. It was not the Obama administration who charged him. It was the Trump administration. But the Obama administration put Julian and WikiLeaks under investigation for 8 years. Now imagine if they had evidence, if the Obama administration had evidence of someone killed or injured due to this publication. Do you think they wouldn't have charged him? Of course they would have, of course. But the Obama administration did not charge him. So it means that they did not have such evidence about the damage, about the people put at risk, the people injured, the people killed. They haven't been able to mention, to bring a single example. So this was part of the demonization campaign. As the rape case, it was part of the demonization campaign. So that people has no empathy. People do not want to support him. He's a bad guy who is violent with women. He is a rapist. So the demonization campaign is one of the reasons why for over a decade, now it's different. Now people, unfortunately, it took the charges. It took, it took the 175 years sentence risk for people realize, it was about the documents. Now, at the end of the day, it was about the documents. It was not about rape, the rape that never was. It was not about the Russia. Russia has done absolutely nothing for Julian. It was not about Trump. Trump was the guy, he's the guy who basically charged him. So it is about his journalistic work. Ewan and I published this very same revelations. We published this, the Guardian published the same revelations. I published the same revelations for since 2009 for basically over a decade. I was never put in prison. I was never, not even questioned.
Not yet, Stefania.
I want to say I had some intimidation. That's true. Some of them scary, but I never want to emphasize this because compared to what Julian has gone through, my troubles were nothing, absolutely nothing. So how can we accept this double standard that we are free and safe whereas he's in prison? We cannot accept neither professionally nor at the human level. The human level is highly problematic. When I wake up in the morning and I think I can walk, I can work, I can meet friends, I cannot accept he cannot do it. I have a conscience, I have a conscience. That's why I don't want to give up on this case. And I fight with the only tool I have, the FOI. There's nothing else. I really would like to have a whistleblower from the inside finally leaking the documentation, because 4 governments have been denying them to me since 2015. It is quite something. It means that these documents are dynamite. Otherwise, they would not deny me the documentation. If the correspondence between them was just bureaucratic correspondence between administrations, between government departments and so on, they would release it. Why not? Why to deny it to me? But the fact that 4 governments, Sweden has FOI laws since the 18th century, 18th century, It has denied the documentation, and we discovered that they destroyed thousands of documents. They never admitted. I discovered this only because the UK authorities told me this, They destroyed thousands of documents. Why? Why they destroyed thousands of documents? This is a very controversial case. It's a very important case. If they played by the rules, they should have published the documents and say, look, this is a rape case, and we did whatever it was necessary for a rape case. Don't have any suspicions about us. Look at the documentation, read whatever you want. No, they denied me documents for years, since 2015 until 2023, 8 years. And at the end of the day, we discovered, thanks to the UK authorities, I don't know why they provided this information. Probably since they destroyed their own documents, they didn't want to be the only one who had destroyed documents. So at the end of the day, they said, hey, Sweden destroyed the documents, and we finally got an explanation because, appeals after appeal in Sweden, we didn't understand why they were not providing these documents until we were told that they had destroyed the documents. So, 4 governments, Sweden, Australia, United States, United Kingdom, have been denied me this documentation for the last 9 years. It means that this documentation contains the smoking gun of what? The smoking gun of this, of these coordinations between governments to keep Julian out of business. And they did it, They took the best years of his life. Even if he will be safe, at the end he will be freed, no one will give back the best years of his life. He was 39 when he published these documents. The Afghan warlocks, Iraq warlocks, now is 53. they took the best years of his life. And they terrified everyone. That's why we don't have sources. We don't have a manning for Ukraine. We don't have a manning for Ukraine. Very likely the sources are terrified. So that's why we absolutely have to win this case. And I take every opportunity to discuss this case, because the only hope Julian has is public pressure. Nothing else will work. It works. Justice won't save him. You know, appeal after appeal. Of course, they will give him another appeal and another appeal and another appeal, 300 appeals, but he remains in prison. And after 300 appeals, he's still in prison. The law has been used against Julian as, you know, as a tool to keep him arbitrarily detained and finally confined and finally imprisoned in Belmarsh. And they have played by the rule. They have used the law. They haven't sent the killers, as I said. They haven't sent the killers. So unless there is public pressure, Julian won't be free. So we have to, absolutely have to win this case. For Julian, absolutely. For Stella, for their children, absolutely, you know. But we also have to win for us, because, you know, if we lose the freedom to expose state criminality, we will no longer live in a free society. There was an anti-fascist, a famous anti-fascist politician in Italy who said, freedom is like the air. You realize that how vital it is when you lose it, when you start losing it. And if we start losing, if we lose the freedom to expose state criminality, we lose the freedom of living in a democracy. Yeah. Seriously, seriously.
No freedom.
Thank you.
I'm impressed everybody stuck to their time. Stella, okay, throw it open to questions. Okay, first question there.
Can I just say that I understand exactly what you're saying. 33 years ago, I was put into Belmarsh with a case for the defence against the neo-Nazi National Front in this country. I went from St James's Palace discussing architecture to Belmarsh Prison, and I was asked to keep His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales Institute of Architecture informed. And the black community in South East London gave me a black solicitor, Wayne Thompson, and we wrote from inside Belmarsh to St James's Palace, and the letter we got was given to the judge. For 33 years, the case details have been suppressed, and I understand exactly what you're talking about. If truth suppressed could take to wing, to Maria Assumpta like birds they'd sing, no longer numbed by Vespine sting, an evening star still shines. I'm a performance poet, and that talks to, you know, I hope that talks to you. I've given Stella tonight a link to the Royal Borough of Greenwich. The Anne-Marie Cousins is the cabinet member, formerly for Community Safety and Enforcement. She's got a copy of my trial manuscript, 2 not guilties against CID Greenwich when they backed the National Front, 18 months before Stephen Lawrence was murdered. He wanted to be an architect. We've now got a black architect, Ewan Mcgaskill, president of the Royal Institute of British Architects. And he's in Washington today, meeting with Kimberly Dowdell, a black woman architect who's president of the American Institute of Architects. So we've gone from the bottom over the last 40 odd years to the point now we're still fighting for justice, but it goes now in the construction industry all the way to the top. So what I've given you is worth more than gold, and send in my regards, right? No justice, no peace.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for such a powerful talk. I remember when the laws were published, I was quite young as a child. Sorry, is it okay not to have a video? Sorry. I grew up sort of understanding what Julian was going through. I saw him when he came to my university student union, and there was standing ovation for him. So people in my generation, I'm in my mid-30s, we grew up with awareness of what Julian Assange had did for us, which is amazing. But what I find quite puzzling, I think you may have touched on it, is it feels like people have to some extent forgotten him. Not everyone, there's so many of us here, but there's a critical mass of people who I think have either are unaware of what Julian actually did for us and the amount of risk he took to set the truth free. And in particular, I'm quite puzzled by how you've got this new emerging left or independent or alternative media that's arising. So you've got like Breakthrough News, they've got Novara Media, that has gained a lot of traction amongst people who are dissatisfied with mainstream politics, but they don't seem to give a huge amount of visibility to what's happened to Julian Assange. And I find that really weird, frankly. And I just wondered, what do you think is underneath that, and how can we, I mean, I know Stella's done amazing work, and I've come to a lot of the protests and talks, but what more can we do to really wake people up to the severity of the situation and show that it's about Julian, it's also about us as well?
That's a really good question, which is at the core of the whole thing.
Yeah.
The question is, why is there insufficient interest in the UK today in what's happened to Julian Assange?
Yeah.
Good question.
Well, partly because it's being suppressed, right? I mean, it's being
Exactly.
suppressed because they're not releasing the documents. It's being suppressed, it has been suppressed because, frankly, a lot of the media has taken part in the smearing.
Yeah.
And you know, talking about Julian also draws attention to their own conduct. So there's that. But I mean, I don't. Sure. There's more could be done in terms of alternative media attention to Julian's case. But I don't. One just has to build one's own networks and not rely. They'll come when they. When they
get permission.
No, I mean, they're not leaders. They're not there to show leadership. Leadership has to come from elsewhere, and I think there's actually the UK might be a specific case, but Julian's case is actually very well known, and it is used as a symbol of one of the great injustices of our times all over the world,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
It comes up all the time. It is a reference point for our generation, and nothing will take that away. And maybe in 5-10 years, everyone will pretend like they were totally on it.
Are there restrictions on his visiting rights?
He has a list of visitors, and the prison has to approve the list.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just...
Please.
It's a puzzle to me why the media don't do more about Julian Assange, because this is a huge story about media freedom. It impacts on all journalists, and yet there's been a sort of near silence.
It's not just journalists, it's everybody.
But if the media aren't reporting it, the public aren't going to hear about it. It's bad here. It's even worse in America. People in America think Julian Assange and Edward Snowden are the same person. They've got zero interest. If there was media coverage in the US Julian Assange would not be in jail now. It's just that, why do they not do that? It's partly, I think, what Stefania said, that after the Swedish rape allegations, Julian was treated as a sort of no-go area. I think that's improved because of the various court actions. There's much more sympathy in the British media now towards Julian, but it hasn't translated into stories. It's not a major story in the BBC, it's not a major story in the newspaper, and it's a puzzle to me.
Yeah. Can I just add one thing? So when I started working on this case, I was working for what is the most important media group in Italy, L'Espresso La Repubblica. You have to realize, thanks to Julian and WikiLeaks, I revealed incredible things about Italy. And not even once the Italian state TV asked me to 1 minute of comment or run a story about these revelations. It was no-go zone. So the people have been deprived of this information, crucial information about my country, very important information. So it was no-go area. And you know, after basically 14 years, I had to resign from my newspaper. No one was telling me, you don't have to do this. But you will see editors rolling their eyes, you will see that everything was very difficult. To get an article published, you had to stay putting pressure for days and days and days. So you realize that was something you didn't have to touch. So I think there is this kind of pressure in the media. Now it's better, I think. Now it's better, it's more mainstream. Pope Francis, receive granted.
The mud from the rape allegations is still stuck because it's only
stuck, but it's better. But for a decade, I can assure you, it was terrible. It was really, and after 2017, when there were the CIA plans to kill them, I think something happened in the newsroom. There was a bad atmosphere. I don't know what happened. I really would like to know, because it was when problems with my newsroom and editor escalated. But in those days when the CIA planned to kill or kidnap, they probably whispered, in the editor's ears something. I wonder what happened, because there was some tension, there was some bad atmosphere. So I think this kind of pressure do exist, absolutely do exist.
I'm sorry. Who?
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all three of you for such amazing contributions. It's a real honour to hear you personally. And I'd also like to say, touching what the sister over there said actually, I'm also wondering about that, and I'm not surprised, but so sorry, you. I think it's about suppression. You'd think, wouldn't you, that some journalists over here would say, look, we have a fellow journalist who is actually telling the truth about things, and for that he has been imprisoned, he can't see his family, etc., etc. Unfortunately, maybe they're just not interested, perhaps they're frightened. We know how things work in the UK, and like you, I'm also ashamed of this country and how they're not standing up. I'm not surprised. And so with regard to that, Stella, based on what you just said, would you recommend then that the best way to get the story out is to just within our own, even personal networks? For example, through Bookmarks I knew about this evening, my colleague and I here. So that's the best way to spread the word. Okay, thank you. And I wanted to ask you, with regard to the constant exclusion of being able to access documents, things have been destroyed, lies are being told. How did you overcome that? Because I know it's taken a while, and I'm sure you have a lovely team with you, and together you work, I'm sure, but how did you overcome that on a daily basis? Because it just must be so disheartening and Yeah, I just wanted to know that. Thank you.
Sorry, I promised I'd repeat the question.
Don't worry.
So the question is, how did you overcome all the...
So first of all, I hope one day I will wake up in the morning and I don't have to be concerned about how the US and UK authorities are denying me the documents about Julian Assange, because in the last 9 years I've been always waking up in the morning and how can I get these documents, because they don't want to release me the documents. And so it has been very intense. You have to be very determined, you have to be, and it's the fury of this injustice that keep me going. It's the fury, because when you read the documents, you can see the Machiavellian work behind the scene. It's clear, it's open. So you want to discover it. You want the full picture, and it's the fury to get it that keep me going, basically.
Okay, yeah, good.
Do you think the recent events in Palestine has raised Julian's profile, especially in terms of being an anti-war activist and journalist?
Maybe it's opened a broader set of the population to the war machine, to the exceptionalism that Israel is engaged in, but the US has been playing this game for a long time in relation to the ICC and so on. I mean, I think it's opened up a whole public conscience to massive injustice. And so new lots of people are becoming aware of Julian's role as a anti-war activist, thinker, and so on. Especially because there are a lot of young people who are engaged, and in a way that 5 years ago there wasn't. That's both due to how much more I don't know, how we're just headed. We're in the middle of two major conflicts, and potentially more, and the wheels that are turning are everyone can tell outside of our control, certainly, and they're getting more and more headed in a more and more uncontrolled direction, right? So I think people are a lot more engaged in terms of anti-war activism for sure, and of course Julian is at least one of the most prominent anti-war activists and thinkers of our time. So yeah. And
he's unique because he and the WikiLeaks are not just anti-war. They provide the documents, secret documents, which basically, destroy the war machine. That's why they hate him and the WikiLeaks war.
Yeah, look, one of Julian's quotes is, WikiLeaks is not for or against killing the whales. It just provides the evidence so you can decide whether you back killing the whales or not. So, it goes to most people are naturally anti-war, and once they see the horrors of it, they oppose it. But that's why there's such an enormous suppression when it comes to war, to manipulate the public.
And cover up, yes. Wow, so many questions.
I know, how much time have we got? Because I've told an hour.
How much time do we have? We need to ask Bookmarks. When do we have to leave? 8:30.
Oh, that's all right then.
Great.
Can we take maybe 2 questions at a time and do it that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just want to make a short comment, and it's that remember when Julian Assange published all these documents, we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have what we have in Gaza, which is people, Palestinians actually relying all this information directly. That's why it's so important what he did at that time when we didn't have social media, or people didn't have the mobiles to show what was going on. And I think I just wanted to ask if he were to be free. I know that Mexico has offered citizenship, and you don't need to tell us the plans, but how do you see Julian Assange coming free and his role, both your roles in the future?
Okay. So the question was how
He would choose his life.
what might happen when he's free, because Julian will be free. I don't know is the answer, but safety is the first priority. I know that Julian, if he is able, he would like to at least go to Mexico and hopefully that could be soon.
There's a hand up. Yeah.
I was wondering, not that anyone could project the future or what will happen, but is there any speculation of whether Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I know that we talked about Starmer in the UK, but if he were actually given a shot at, candidacy or something, do you think he'd actually keep his word about pardoning Snowden and Julian?
Well, the problem with that is he's got absolutely no chance of becoming president.
Any backing must be good, though.
Yeah, sure. I know. I mean, I'm pleased that he said that, but it's just not going to happen. Sorry.
But I think it's good to remind Snowden, because Julian is in prison, Snowden is in exile. Let's not forget Sarah Harrison, who helped Snowden to get asylum. She risks extraditions like Julian.
I'm sorry, I can't be optimistic about it. I'm sorry. Yep.
Please.
Black keys or the white keys? Which one?
Who's got? I can only see one hand up, and that's yours.
Since I've been following Julian's case, I feel like I've been lied to my entire life in this country. The judiciary in this country's got a reputation. It's always had a big reputation, English judiciary. Do you think that they're worried about their reputation by continuing to hold Julian? And do you think that they'd be so worried about their reputation, that is one of the things that would stop them from sending him to America?
Can I answer that? Stella knows the legal stuff inside out. I'm just
later on, can I? Yeah. No, please go for it. And then.
The UK judiciary is politicised. The idea that somehow they're sitting there and they're all adjudicating.
Has it always been politicised?
It's always been politicised. Yes. They make decisions. America wants Julian Assange extradited. Britain isn't going to stop that because they're so dependent on the US. The intelligence alliance between the US and the UK is like that. They're tight. Britain gets 90% of its intelligence from the NSA and the smaller CIA. They're not going to endanger that by not giving America what they want. So as long as America wants Julian Assange back in US, they'll get it.
Can I just say, you do get exceptions though. Lord Chief Justice Goldring found in my favour, and he also found in favour the people of Liverpool as well. So you do get exceptions.
I just want to add something about the British justice. You know, I come from a country where we have all sorts of legal scandal, judicial scandal, whatever. Italy, you know, has this kind of problems, corruption and so on. However, not even in Italy it would be possible to keep in prison 5 years. You know, a person without trial. It would be impossible. It's 1 year in Italy. There is a limitation. Then they can get an extension, but the extension could be 1 year and a half in total. There's no way, not even in Italy. You know, we have very bad prison regimes, like 41 bis. 41 bis is just one step behind the SAM regime. And we had cases at the European Court of Human Rights for the 41 bis regime, which is considered torture because it's very extreme. It's for very dangerous mafia people and terrors. But not even if we have this extreme prison regime, incarceration regimes like 41 bis, in Italy it would be absolutely impossible to keep in prison 5 years without trial. No way. No way.
Even extradition cases?
No way. Extradition is 1 year. They can get an extension, 6 months in addition to 1 year, but then stop. There's no way. So it would be impossible. This is to tell you how, you know, absurd, I'm afraid to say absurd, your country when it comes to this justice system, you know?
Sorry, Stella?
Of course the courts are sensitive to criticism of over their, well, keeping Julian in prison for over 5 years. I mean, it's very important to keep on pointing out that they're allowing this, you know, to unfold.
Have you brought up financial compensation? Because that normally shakes them as well. Now, seriously, I mean, 5 years in prison for, you know, it's how much is that worth to your children?
Well, the UN already, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention already ruled in 2015 that Julian should be compensated for arbitrary detention, and the UK ignored it and so on.
I would like to say something that.
Yes.
Now, I've started to be attached to this case very recently, and I probably still don't know the whole story. However, I went to watch the documentary at the cinema, and what I feel that it is that the public response to the case is not that big, is because to me I feel there is a very big imbalance in between. Now we call Julian by first name, and it is the Americans or the UK government, or it is like no one on that part is taking responsibility for nothing, because they don't have a name. And Julian is Julian. So that to me in communication is something that I felt very bad when I went to watch it was very touching and very moving, and I felt angry. I felt really, oh my goodness. And this is something that probably we should start calling them, these people, whoever is doing stuff, calling them by name. And it is when we hear about a rape in the TV, is the victim has been raped and never the person that did the thing. It is a very small, I don't know, sorry, I'm Italian and I do not have all the vocabulary that I need to express this, but it is a very little thing about the words, but it makes a difference in this, because they are too big and no name, and the other one is one little person that is fighting for everyone. That is very, I don't know, I feel that.
Thanks for that. Can we take a few questions? That would be easier otherwise, because I think we'd have to go have a sort of informal thing afterwards, aren't we? Yeah, okay, at the back there. Sorry.
Yeah, mine's linked to this question about the judiciary, and you mentioned that, the British judiciary is politicised. I'm very curious, do you have any idea how these machinations actually work? I've noticed, for example, that most of the judges, thanks to the work of D+1 UK, have been shown to have some very serious conflicts of interest, varying degrees, but some of them really stark. Is that how the interests of the security state are put in place, by selecting specific judges? And who is in charge of that? You mentioned naming names. Who decides which judges rule on these cases? Because it does look glaring. Or are there any other ways that you see that the judiciary is leveraged or forced or whoever else does it actually work?
Any more questions?
Yes, please.
I have a couple of questions, but first I just wanted to say, if you want to put a name, there's Keir Starmer and Hogan and St. Pancras, whom we can put a name to, and whom we can pick out of this electing and But I have three questions. One is, Ewan, do you think there is a D-notice out in relation to the case? Secondly, Stefania, I know that you attended various FOIA hearings here where you've been fighting. Could you tell us a little bit more about the most recent steps? And thirdly, I just wanted to ask, one of the questions, perhaps it's for Stella, I don't know if it's for you as journalists as well. A lot of the journalists I speak to say, there's nothing new in the case. And I wondered whether you could tell us about ways in which you could hijack the news cycle, but also if there is anything you are doing with promising young journalists in Britain, encouraging them to look at the case, or you yourself, if you're writing about it, are you writing somewhere that we can follow? Thanks.
If I go first then.
Yeah.
Okay. Where to start? The D-notice. D-notice, if anybody doesn't know what that is, if there's a story that's regarded as endangering national security or sensitive to national security, the government issues to all the newsrooms a D-notice. And the D-notice is advising you shouldn't run this story because it's not in the national interest. Now people misunderstand it. I used to get a D-notice at least once a month and I would just ignore them. You don't have to obey it. But people like the BBC, when they get a D-notice or the Daily Mail or wherever, they get a D-notice. That gives them an excuse not to run stories they don't want to. At the time of Snowden, the Guardian ran the revelations. The BBC didn't report it. The Daily Mail, Telegraph didn't report it. They reported the government reaction, but they didn't report what Snowden was actually saying. So that's how the D-notice works. The young journalists, this generation of journalists coming up are terrific. I was brought up in a journalistic tradition where you joined a paper, local paper, you worked your way up. There was a hierarchy. Journalists behaved as if they were the high priests of knowledge, dispensing information to the masses. Now, because of the internet, anybody can be a journalist. Anybody can get information out. It's a much healthier ecosystem now. And I mentor and teach young journalists and around the world, and they're fantastic. They're not motivated by money. They don't want to be famous. They just want to uncover the truth. Doesn't matter. India, Latin America, in this country, it's fantastic. They're much, much better than my generation. So I'm hopeful. On the judicial thing, It just, as you said, it permeates the whole system. But one example specific, and Stella and Stefania know all about this, especially Stefania, since she had covered it. When Stefania asked the the Crown Prosecution Service for information about Julian's case, this was at the time a high-profile case. The Crown Prosecution Service came back and says, we can't give you that information because when the civil servant dealing with it retired, all the information was destroyed. All the emails were destroyed. Can you believe that in a high-profile case like this, they would destroy all the emails? That's what they said in 2017. They've now admitted that wasn't the case. So you say, well, what are they hiding? What are they, as Stefania said earlier, what are they lying about? What is it?
So they didn't destroy the UK documents?
Well, they said they did, and then they said, well, it had nothing to do with the civil servant retiring. So we're still in the dark.
Yes, now they have changed tactics. Now they say, well, we destroyed the account, the email account of Mr. Portclose, but the documentation was copied into the case file. But this is not true. We don't have any, there is no way to know whether they copy the full documentation in this account, in the case file. Because when I ask correspondence between the Crown Prosecution Service and the Swedish authorities about crucial weeks, like for example, the week he took refuge in the embassy. It's impossible that there was no communication between Britain and Sweden. Or the week he got asylum from Ecuador. It's impossible, there was no communication. And there are no conversations in the emails I got. So where are these documents? And when I ask, could you please check the files? Because there must be conversation, there must be correspondence related to those specific weeks where the most important developments were going on. And they said, well, if they ever existed, we deleted. So they admitted this. And now they are trying, no, we deleted the account, but the documentation was copied and put in the case file. But if the documentation was in the case file, they would have told me, yes, we have these documents, but they are exempted for this reason. They are exempted for, national security or international relations. They didn't. It means that this documentation has been destroyed. And for the last 7 years, we discovered this in 2017, we are in 2024, for the last 7 years, they have never provided a sensible explanation, never ever. Last year, because there was a question about this, the latest developments, last year, Judge O'Connor basically ruled that the Crown Prosecution Service has to provide any information they have, or they have to basically explain why they don't, on which ground they cannot provide this information. Well, they came out with a document saying this document is about the standard operating procedures about destroying accounts. So we asked them, look, if these documents is actually the standard operating procedures in those years, why no one knew it? How is it possible that no one had mentioned this document to us? We have been asking for the last 7 years. How is it possible that no one had seen this document, no one had ever stumbled on this document? It's all these contradictory, answers from the Crown Prosecution Service. First they said they had destroyed after 3 months. Mr. Portclose had retired. Then, after 7 years, they came out that they had destroyed after 30 days. So we asked them, 3 months or 30 days? All these contradictory statements suggest some kind of irregular procedures. We had evidence of interference by the Crown Prosecution Service on the Swedish prosecution. And again, you ask why there was this interference. Why an obscure lawyer at the Crown Prosecution Service could have an interest to keep this case open with no end in sight, So all these things and contradictory statements suggest some kind of irregular procedure, irregular handling of the case, cover up, probably. And that's why I don't want to give up the litigation.
Stella?
I don't know if I should add anything to.
Maybe we have to answer the woman who said is Julian without versus someone not identified.
I get your point to personalize, but I think it's also true that Julian's up against institutional resistance.
Yeah.
That goes from administration to administration. You can say Trump 5 years ago, but Biden now.
No. Yeah.
But yes, it should be those responsible should absolutely be identified. But it
also the people that have been relieved by the documents, like the video, the footage. I mean, all these people committed crime, and it is there. It's an evidence. Why nobody ever talk about what they're paying, if they're paying for what they did, if they're not, if there is any, because it is an injustice, but at least something would be happening on the other side as well. It revealed, as all the journalists that were working with him, it revealed things that were awful. They were absolutely incredible. And why nobody of them is staying not 5 minutes, not 1 minute in jail?
Not only that, I think. Also the fact that, for example, thanks to Julian and WikiLeaks and this documentation and the source, of course, Chelsea Manning, we revealed extremely serious abuses of human rights. For example, how in the case of Italy and Germany, how the Germany and Italy basically granted impunity to the CIA agents involved in the extraordinary rendition. And there was not a single NGO or I don't know, any kind of civil society organization which filed a criminal complaint to get these people, put on trial, this tells you a lot. This tells you that this state criminality has a larger support than the criminal itself. If they only had support by the state, there would be some kind of opposition, some kind of maybe, but they enjoy impunity because they have a large support in the media, in many different places, in civil society and so on.
And many of those NGOs that would have the resources to do such a thing receive funding from that same government, right? So I mean, why hasn't it happened? Sometimes it's a painful exercise to really understand why it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Just a small point. Stella's right. There is an institutional bias here. In the US, the Obama administration decided not to go for prosecution, and some of the people in the Obama administration said, that what Julian and Snowden had done was good. They started a debate with Trump. But throughout all this, the Department of Justice in the US has been intent on pursuing, almost to a vindictive level, Julian. And I don't understand why. It may be because intelligence agencies are saying, look, we've got to make an example of him, and that'll maybe deter future whistleblowers, journalists. So let's make an example of him. It's a puzzle to me why the US Department of Justice is being as vindictive as it is. But I think we should sum up now. I'm not going to say any more, but I think, Stella, you've sort of closing words, and Stefania. I'm sorry for the people who've still got questions. We've been here 90 minutes, not told it was an hour.
Yeah, it's 8 p.m.
We'll have time, maybe you can answer some questions informally.
Sure. Well, anything could happen. And although this case has gone on for many years now, the fact that Julian has not been extradited to date is a victory. It's not a victory that he's in prison, but there have been extraordinary forces trying to get Julian extradited to the United States. And so far, we have resisted that, and the courts see the protests outside when we get to court. There's no way they don't perceive that when they're sitting in court and making their decisions. So public pressure is essential in keeping Julian safe. The fact that the High Court has allowed Julian to bring his appeal is a major victory, and it's on the press freedom point, and that is undeniable. There has been such massive effort to try to divert attention from the essence of the case, and here we are before the High Court with the essence of the case. So, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that Julian will be free soon. That the monstrosity that has been done to him is obvious for any person who is observing this, objectively. And Julian has already been vindicated. First through the the crucial work that WikiLeaks has done, exposing state criminality and cover-ups and so on. But then by the way that he has been persecuted, his persecutors have exposed themselves. And we're still in the middle of this fight. But I feel we're going to win this one. And he's been building. What sustains Julian is that he thinks we will win this fight. So please be there. Yeah. Please keep on supporting Julian. And yes, the networks, the individual networks, is really how public pressure grows. Speaking to your friends and family and colleagues and so on, and bringing them to events like this, or to see the documentary, or spreading the word, because it's self-evident. Once people have access to the information, it is self-evident.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stella.
Yeah.
The last word?
To me. Yeah, I agree with whatever she said, and I think that it is the power that won't make us feeling powerless, so that we are passive, we don't do anything, we think that nothing can change, but this is not true. And this case is about us, is about Julian, of course, it is about Stella, their kids, but it is about us. It is about our freedom. It is absolutely outrageous that they want to keep Julian in prison for 175 years for exposing war crimes. It is absolutely outrageous, and we absolutely have to win, and we have not to allow them to put in prison. It will be our victory, because society has changed a lot. 100 years ago I wouldn't be here as a woman. You know, society has changed, not because because people force the power to change, you know. So we can change, absolutely, and we have to change and to win this case. That's why I'm fighting.
Thank you.
I mean, thanks to you all for coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of people here.
Yeah.
That. And thanks to the bookshop, Bookmarks, for hosting it. Thank you.
And please get Stefania's book if you don't have it yet.